Alright guys, we have a brand new character in the game, which is Hanamiya. So let's talk about what kind of player he is, whether he's any good, what's the investment, and also what will be the talent priority, awakening recommendation, and also potential build for him. So let's start off with talk about what kind of player he is. He's a very defensive player in the sense that he's probably the best stealer in the game. However, that is assuming you are actually able to use him properly, because as you will see later on when I talk about his ultimate skill, he is actually one of those characters that needs quite a bit of practice and also a bit of skill in order to get his full potential out. So he can definitely be very good in terms of defensive plays. He is, like I said, the best stealer in the game if you're able to utilize him properly. He's normally used as a way to counter and also shut down the enemy point guard in terms of their passing lanes. So he's extremely effective if you want to make a counter pick. For example, if when the enemy choose, let's say, Takao, who try to do a layup and pass, etc., Hanamiya is going to be the best counter pick for those kind of situations. But you are required to be fairly skilled, I would say, in order to make sure exactly how to play him effectively, especially when it comes to his ultimate time. So if you're just trying him out and you're not really able to get the best out of him, that's kind of to be expected. He is going to be one of those characters that takes a bit more practice in order to unleash his full potential. Okay, so with that being said, let's just quickly go into his talent priority and what do you actually want to upgrade first. Now, even though he's a very defensive type of character, because it actually takes quite a bit of practice in order for you to get the hang of his defensive skills and the interception, etc. Personally, I would actually recommend you guys upgrade his offensive move first, because he's actually fairly simple when it comes to different attacking variations. So you want to make sure you have all of the different variations possible, and then on the defensive hand, you need a bit of a time to warm up and get comfortable anyway. So that's kind of why I feel like it's more natural to leave the defensive talents at a later date once you are more used to how to play him effectively and how to position him, etc. So when it comes to offensive move, the ones you want to unlock is going to be skilled branch number 3 and number 4. Those are his 2 offensive branches, and you do want to max it out completely. For branch 4, you want to go all the way to the end for this catch step back floater. That basically means the enemy needs to keep an eye on you. He can't leave you completely open, otherwise it's actually going to be quite hard for them to even interfere you. So this is very useful. This skill is also going to get a massive upgrade once you actually have him at Awakening 4 as well. And I will talk that towards the later section when I talk about his awakening. But this is kind of one of his key attacks when it comes to offensive moves. And then the other thing you also want is going to be his skill 3. If you do not have Hanamiya at awakening 4, his skill 3 is probably going to be the one you actually use the most, purely because it has 2 different block timing for his layup. So when you first unlock it, it has this layup, which is kind of going towards the other side of the basket for him to kind of lay up backwards. And then there's also a second block timing where he is able to lay up before he even passed kind of the basket section. Okay, so basically this one, he's basically doing a layup on the same side where he's driving, whereas the first layup timing you're able to unlock is actually he will be basically driving all the way past the basket before then throwing the ball backwards. Okay, so that's kind of 2 different block timing. And like I said, if you do not have him at awakening 4, normally you want to use the layup to play a guessing game with the opponent. But once you actually do have him at awakening 4, which I'll show you later on, then he actually have a lot more different variation when he does his catch setback floater, and then that will be the variation you want to use the more often once you get him to awakening 4. Okay, now from defensive point of view, so first of all you unlock those 2 skills completely, and then from defensive point of view, the first branch you want to just unlock the very first one for masterpiece. The other notes afterwards, this one's a bit RNG dependent, and this one is a bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that it basically allows you to dash forward to steal, which can allow you to close quite a bit of a gap. But at the same time, if you actually miss the steal, you could leave the enemy completely open, because then you kind of run past them. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So that's kind of what I don't think is a high priority to unlock it straight away. And then for the second branch, all you need is going to be the first one, which is the clever spin. This just allows you to move around a bit quicker. The next one is also nice, which allows him to bypass screens. However, once again, it's a bit RNG based, okay? So that's kind of why I feel like it can be a lower priority. And then afterwards, so after you unlock the very first talent node for both skill 1 and also skill 2. You can then move on to his ultimate attack, and this one basically just depending on how much resource you have, you unlock it as far as possible. If you're on a low budget, I actually think he's perfectly playable if you just unlock the first talent. The later talents, they are also very, very strong, but it does kind of require a bit more skill usage. So those are kind of what I said earlier. As you play him more and get more comfortable with his positioning, that's where the later skills are going to shine. But if you're just starting out, just unlocking the very first talent node is absolutely fine as you start to try him out for the first time. Okay, so that's kind of the main idea. Now, the reason why I say it does require quite a bit of skill as you actually unlock him is because at the very end, what you're going to get is this ability to, I think it's up to here, web trap, which is that you will see that you are able to unlock a second ultimate button, which basically allow him to, whenever he lay his web, he's going to get this additional button where he can do a bit of an interception move. Now, this is the one which is going to require a bit of a skill because first of all, you need to know where you want to place the web. And then second thing, you have to make sure that when you are on the web, you are able to get the right timing to actually intercept it. So this is probably the most tricky part to Hanamiya's kit. And also, if you do actually want to get the most out of him, this is probably the one that you can practice the most as you have different matches. Okay, so that's kind of why I'm gonna suggest leaving those to the end. So that's going to be his talent priority. Now let's talk about his awakening skills. For me, the most important awakening is going to be awakening 4. This is because this actually opens up a whole other variation to his attacking offensive moves. I know normally you kind of expect Hanamiya to be more defensive players, but at the same time, you don't really want a dead weight on your team. You kind of need to make sure everyone on your team at least have some kind of offensive capability so that the opponent doesn't leave you completely unguarded and gang up on your teammates, etc. But that's kind of what I do feel like Awakening 4 is going to be quite useful. And basically what this allows you to do is that before, when you have to that catch, then the only thing you can do is basically just step back for that jump shot. However, now you actually have an ability to drive away, and this is very, very important because in Hanamiya's base kit, he only have one drive direction. Okay, so unlike lots of other characters who can basically have a second drive, Hanamiya doesn't have that. However, if you're able to unlock this skill, basically enable you two things. First of all, when you actually do a catch, you are no longer restricted to, you are forced to shot, so the enemy is not going to necessarily have to jump to block you. This already plays a bit of a guessing mind game with the opponent because they have to guess whether you're going to shoot or whether you're going to drive. And then the second thing is because now you have the second drive, and also you can then follow up this with your normal drive. So basically you can do a catch and drive and then a normal drive. That actually allow you to cover a lot more ground because first of all, you can go from the middle all the way to the baseline, or the other way you can also turn back into the other direction. So it actually opens up a whole different type of attacking position for you. So that's kind of what this is actually going to be a massive upgrade for Hanamiya, at least from an offensive point of view. Now, if you're playing Hanamiya purely for defense, no offense at all, then you can get away without getting Awakening 4. However, if you do actually want him to become a bit of a secondary scorer, I feel like Awakening 4 is going to be mandatory for him to actually open up his offensive capability. Okay, so that's going to be my recommendation on his Awakening. Now, when it comes to potential build, there's only one set I'm going to recommend, which is going to be a hybrid energy and also stealing build. Now, for energy, it's going to be quite important that you charge as much as possible because that's kind of his main signature skill, but also you kind of want to have it early because the thing is that his ultimate skill is an interception skill, and interception does require quite precise positioning, and sometimes you may be in the right position. However, if your ult is not ready, you'll be essentially missing out on that opportunity. So that's kind of what personally I just suggest you have that ult ready as soon as possible, so at least you have that secret card in your back pocket in case you get lucky with the positioning as the match goes on. Okay, so with that being said, the blue one I'm going to recommend initial energy. For green one, I'm going to recommend stealing and also energy regen. And then for the yellow one, I'm going to recommend mid-range and steal because mid-range is also kind of his main attacking options. And then in terms of trades, I'm going to recommend natural talent once again just to get your first ult as soon as possible to have that in your back pocket. Then you want to make some noise so that you can recharge your ult as much as possible as well to have as many interception chances as possible. And then the this last one is going to be down to how you want to play him. If you want a bit more offensive way of playing him, then what you can go for is you can go for something which increase your mid-range shot, such as Shooter's Heart. Now, if you want something which is a bit more defensive, so more stealing options, then you can go for Sprint Lock instead to increase the chance of interception when you accelerate. Okay, so now let's wrap up this video. Should you actually summon for Hanamiya? Hanamiya is definitely the best dealer in the game, in my opinion. However, he is possibly also one of the most difficult characters to use because you have to be somewhat strategic in terms of where you place your web and also get the right timing when it comes to interception. And that basically requires both knowledge in terms of how to actually play Hanamiya himself and also just knowledge about the game flow in general. For example, you have to be able to predict when the enemy is going to intercept so that you know where to lay your traps, etc. So he's definitely going to be a character who takes a bit of time for you to get used to. And I will probably say that, let's say if you already play a point guard such as Akashi and you already have trouble, both Akashi and Takao, for example, both of them are actually very good at intercepting enemy passings. If you're already having trouble playing Akashi and Takao, then I'll definitely say Hanamiya is going to be way out of your league because you won't be able to actually pull it off as easily. You might be thinking his ultimate is automatic, so surely that makes it easier. Yes, his main ultimate skill is automatic, but one massive selling point for his ultimate is actually also the fact that you're able to unlock a second button so that when you're actually on the web, you also have this interception ability, okay? And this is kind of what makes Hanamiya even better than Akashi and Taka when it comes to intercepting. So that's kind of why it does take a bit of skill, and if you're already having trouble mastering interception with Takao and also Akashi, then Hanamiya is possibly going to be out of your league. However, if you're already very skilled at kind of predicting enemies' passing lane and also intercepting, then I definitely think Hanamiya can be a character who is going to be very, very good, and especially as a counter pick choices when enemy already choose, for example, point guards who are mainly relying on passing to, for example, shooting guards or passing, for example, Takao who try to do a layup and pass, etc. Hanamiya is actually able to shut them down completely. So he's definitely a very, very good character as a counter pick, depending on the enemy composition. But at the same time, like I said, it's going to take you a bit of a skill in order to actually be able to pull off him correctly. So if you're not comfortable with your skills in using him, then I'll probably say he's going to be an easy pass. However, if you do think that you're going to be good enough to actually master him, then yes, he can be definitely one of the best characters in the game.